All right, welcome back to Sports Sunday. We have a man who hasn't slept much this week, much like myself. Blair Kerkhoff from the Kansas City Star. What a week, eh, Blair?
There's never been a week like it as far as I'm concerned, covering college sports in this town for 20 years. I've never had a week quite like this.
Now, the news that you're kind of reporting today is that some of these schools are really trying to hold this Big 12 together. Is there any chance of that happening? Dan Beebe obviously trying to make a sales pitch talking about, what, 15, 17 million in annual revenue if they stay together as a group of 10?
Right. SEC money is what what they're talking about. The SEC, of course, just started a monster contract, and they're paying their schools about $17 million a year, and that's what Dan Beebe's trying to sell to. That's what he's been trying to sell throughout this whole process. At the Big 12 meetings in Kansas City, he was saying that the Big 12 with future TV contracts can come up with the same kind of money, approach SEC money, 15 to 17 million. So yeah, this weekend he got in touch with officials at Texas, at Oklahoma, Texas A&M, just to gauge their interest, and I think what amounts to put on a kind of a full court press here at the end, because also at those schools this weekend was the Pac-10 commissioner, Larry Scott, with the invitations in his pocket. So no decisions yet, at least as of today. We go into the week now with Board of Regents meetings at these schools, and I think a lot of this is going to unfold over the next couple days.
Basically, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech have all thrown in their lot with Texas. So it sounds like it's kind of, if Texas goes to the Pac-10, they're all going. Right now, what do you think the chances of Texas going to the Pac-10?
Maybe a shade less than going into the weekend. I think the stories on Thursday and Friday with Colorado leaving and then Nebraska leaving. I think we were all right to talk about that as a doom and gloom scenario for the Big 12, and I don't think there was a lot of optimism even in the Big 12 office. But I don't know. I think Texas is sort of in this realization phase. What are we giving up here? We're giving up control by going to the Pac-10 or whatever they're going to call it. They're going to give up control and influence. Maybe their network that they want to start. We know that the Big 12 has awarded the football championship game to Cowboys Stadium for the foreseeable future. That goes away. Maybe Texas is doing a little reflecting now, and it's. I'd say it's still likely that there's no Big 12, in the future. But I don't know. Maybe as we get to the end of the weekend, there's a little bit more of a glimmer of hope that this thing could survive.
Perhaps one of the most amazing parts of this story is that Texas A&M is not latching on to Texas. They've pretty much made it clear they're willing to separate. If Texas goes to the Pac-10, is it looking like A&M more likely to go to the SEC? I mean, we were talking, their athletic director did not like the idea of doing this Pac-16 thing.
That's right, and that is if they don't stay in the Big 12. Right. Yeah, but boy, when we were talking to Bill Burr, the Texas A&M athletic director in Kansas City, we weren't thinking in terms of SEC possibility for them, and he surely was thinking about taking his teams, occasionally to the West Coast, crossing 2 time zones, and that had absolutely no appeal to them. And I go back to the incident that happened just before Christmas when they lost that Derrick Rowland, that great basketball player they had, to a broken leg. I think that game was in Seattle, it was somewhere in Washington, and it was just a tough situation for them, and they're 1,500 miles away from home when that happens, and I think that incident kind of resonated with him and with A&M, and may have had something to do with the idea that they just didn't want to be in the Pac-10.
All right, now let's just presume for a second that this Pac-10 thing happens, all these schools go, the Big 12 breaks up. The 5 leftovers, you reported yesterday, they had a conference call. Legitimate shot of maybe them banding together and trying to form some sort of new league, or going to the Mountain West or bringing Mountain West teams in? Is that a viable option?
Well, I think sticking together is in their best interest. Missouri, KU, K-State, Iowa State, and Baylor. Now, what happens beyond that? Who they might be able to attract? It's still kind of unknown. Would they want to stay in the Big 12 footprint and look at programs like TCU, maybe stretch out to Utah with Utah, BYU? I don't know. It's difficult to say. It's such a hypothetical right now. But I think one thing that's possibly in their favor by sticking together is maintaining the identity of the Big 12, and then maybe wrangling a little bit to see if they can't keep the automatic qualifier for the BCS, which is very significant. That's if you're an automatic qualifier BCS team and you get a free pass into one of the major bowls, your champion does at the end of the year. This past year, that meant $18.5 million for your conference. That's very significant. You want to be a BCS automatic qualifier conference. The Big 12 is.
The way I understand it, though, that BCS bid is not going to be automatic, even if those 5 stay as a Big 12, right? From what I've heard, you need 6 schools was sort of what was written into the bylaws, so they would kind of need an exemption here from the BCS.
They need a little sympathy.
Right.
They would. And I wonder if there wouldn't be just because of the situation that they would find themselves in, through no fault of their own, kind of cast off. I wondered if there wouldn't be a little bit of sympathy for them.
Is Missouri's hopes of the Big Ten all but dashed at this point? Unless we go to super conferences, I guess.
Right. I think Missouri's hope is for, strangely, as strange as it sounds, for there to be utter chaos, for the Pac-10 to go to 16, for the Big Ten to answer, for the SEC to answer and expand their conferences, and you just have to think that Missouri, with the success that it's had in football here the last few years, the fact that they're all but filling up a 65,000 seat football stadium, that they would be attractive to somebody, and I think it'd be folly to rule out Big Ten expansion for them. It doesn't look good, and especially with what Jim Delaney said in Lincoln the other day when he was there for Nebraska, but I wouldn't rule out any possibility for Missouri.
And if it's up to K-State, they're going wherever KU goes, right?
Well, I think that's absolutely in their best interest to go with KU, to be banded with the Jayhawks, and all the public comments from the coaches through the administrators, athletic directors has been, we're in this thing together. I guess it's a matter of how your loyalty is as strong as your options. If for some reason one of the major conferences offered one of the schools and not the other, who's to say what would happen in that type of situation? So who knows? But yes, I think they've said all the right things, and as far as we know, they stick together.
Is this all going to happen this week, you think? Does this all kind of play out? I know everyone seems like Board of Regent meetings coming up in the next 4 days or so.
I think the Big 12's fate will be settled this week. Whether it continues as a 10-team conference or not, or whether it's 1 year left. Nebraska's already kind of thrown down the gauntlet. They're only going to be in there 1 more year. I think we'll know by the end of the week whether we have a Big 12 going forward or not. What we won't know, perhaps, is what the other conferences are going to do. Jim Delaney, like Delaney said in Lincoln the other day, they're going to return to their original timetable, 12 to 18 months. Of course, he said that 6 months ago, so they're sort of on a half a year to a year process now, and they're really in a position where they can sit back and wait and see what others are going to do.
All right, I'm sure you'll stay on top of it in the Kansas City Star and KCStar.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Blair Kerkhoff.